Cool. Okay. Hi, everybody. This is FoxxC, and welcome to my interview show, West Coast Hustle. I'm here with Dylan Moore of Outhouse Cartoons, and we're talking about, in our series of firsts, the first issue of his comic book, Combat Fairies. And first of all, so this is West Coast Hustle, so what's your hustle? What do you do for a living?
My main hustle would be teaching. I teach at Vancouver Film School and the foundation program.
Okay, so primarily drawing and...
I teach... oops, I should turn that on silent, sorry.
That's okay.
I mainly teach animation-based ones, so I do a couple of classical animation classes and a storyboarding class and some digital animation, as well as comics class.
Cool, which is how we met, which was doing the writing for comics. I was doing the writing program, and I ended up kind of doing the art side too, which was super fun. I learned a lot.
Cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Hanging out with some artists. My visual art skills are not professional animator, but it was fun hanging out with people who are.
Yeah, it's always cool when the writers do that. It doesn't happen that often, but it's because it's something that they don't do at all in the writing program. So, yeah.
And a lot of writers just don't have that as a background skill.
Yeah.
Cool. So that takes up most of your time. That pays your bills. And we're here more to talk about the side hustles, which are your current projects going on. So I guess I'll start. You just finished a feature film, an animated film. And that's the Snot That Ate Port Harry.
I finished that. Well, I kind of finished it last year, I guess, but I kind of was still tinkering with it. I had a lot of technical issues and things that I had to put it on pause a little bit towards the end. A lot of post stuff and people helping me that suddenly got busy with other things and whatnot. And so I was still doing a bit of tinkering off and on all the way till January. So I guess I didn't really finish it until the start of this year. And been mostly focused on other things now, but still trying to promote that and whatnot and submit it in festivals and things like that. Yeah.
Has it had any festival traction?
It just got into one called the Something Wicked Film Festival in Georgia. That happens at the start of August.
Oh, cool. I have some viewers in Georgia, so maybe I can go see
check it out. Yeah. I forget where in Georgia, if I'm being totally honest, but I'm sure you can find it online. Something Wicked.
Something Wicked Film Festival. Yeah. Cool. I'll look that up and post a thing because I can do that with technology. And we'll post I'll put a poster up for that too.
There's a pretty good stack of ones I've submitted to for it actually, but most of them don't have decisions yet or anything like that. So
Cool.
So hopefully it won't be the last, but
we'll keep posted on that. And then the thing that we're here to talk about is your new comic, which is Combat Fairies. And I have the first issue right here. I'm just going to hold that up. I'm also going to post, we're going to talk about the cover art later, but I have a nice signed copy there.
That's the first time I've seen it in an actual proper poly bag and backing board, so that's like really cool and professional looking. I didn't do that myself.
No, that was all me. It is cool looking, and that's still in mint condition. It has basically come home and gone into that bag. And so let's go over, I guess we'll do the synopsis. So this is the first issue, and you're up to issue number 3 on Foxxology, and this is the first physical copy of the first issue, and this came out for Geektopia a week and a half ago or so.
Yeah, something like that.
Which is where I got my copy. And how did that go?
Geektopia wasn't bad. It was fun. I haven't been doing the tabling thing that much. It's only, I think my first one was last year, so I'm still kind of learning. I have like this whole like kit set up now, and got like a crate on wheels and the whole 9 yards. So I've come a long way since the first one where I didn't know what the hell to do.
Yeah, just sitting at the table with a sheet over it.
I'm learning the best ways to get attention and stuff. I have a friend that's doing something similar as well, and kind of went to one of his events on the weekend, and I had like a moment where I was like looking across the room towards the table, and I was like, hey, this is what he needs. That means that's also what I need. So that people actually know what it is you do and they can actually come to you and find you and stuff.
Yeah, kind of plan it out and sketch it out.
So it's fun, but you got to get used to it, I think, to really take full advantage of it.
Well, it's like sales and like it's a whole different side of the business too, right?
Yeah. Which I don't think lends itself automatically to the more creative mindset where you kind of want to make stuff. You don't really want to think about how to sell it, but you need to sell it if you want to keep making it.
I know, it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
It's trying to find that. I think that's what's great about being able to access artists directly now. So you have this up on Foxxology. The first 3 issues are there, and they're 99 cents each, which is great. Like, it's like buying.
Well,
a
the
song
idea is
or
it's
something like
I feel like if you're not famous, it's kind of hard to expect anybody to spend any major money. But if you do 99 cents, maybe they'll give it a chance. And if they like it, maybe they'll come back.
Yeah. And if you get, 10 people, that's,
exactly.
the start of something that's real money. Cool. So let's go over a bit of a synopsis. This story follows Ayla and Nora, Kiani, Brietta, and Cinia, who are part of the Combat Fairy Corps, and they're fighting to decide if the other world, which is like the kind of fantasy realms, are going to intervene in humanity's World War III.
Exactly.
Cool. So where did that idea come from?
Well, originally it was just a drawing of Ayla that didn't have any story elements or anything attached to it. I just thought it would be kind of a fun doodle like this, just like this fairy with like giant, ridiculously sized guns and things like that, and like and just stupid trinkets on it and stuff like that. Like she's got like a hula girl in the back of her big gun and stuff. And it was just about that. And then it was kind of fun to design that, so I thought, oh, maybe I'll do like another one that would be theoretically a team member. And then some story ideas started coming out of that, and I kind of thought maybe I'll do some like one-off comics one day, just like not necessarily with a big overarching plot necessarily, just kind of like fun little mini adventures, kind of like the Dirty Dozen of the fairy world kind of thing. And the whole World War III happening at the same time as having their own kind of civil war among the fantasy realm seemed like it might be kind of a neat backdrop, with no intent of really getting into the actual like political side of things. But then some stuff happened in the world a couple years ago where people started actually being worried about World War III and everything. And so then I thought, if I'm going to do that story, I think I need to either completely change the back story or change some things so I can actually sort of address it or comment on it in some way. And then I thought, if I'm going to do that, then I better do it sooner rather than later. So then that kind of, and then once I thought of that, it kind of gave me an idea for a MacGuffin of sorts for the characters, and all of a sudden I had an actual complete beginning, middle, and end for a whole plot. So it stopped being mini adventures, and it kind of became this whole thing. So cool. Yeah. So
how far do you have this outlined?
I have 12 issues written, which have a complete arc.
Okay.
But I also do have notes. I'm kind of treating it sort of like a season of TV.
Okay.
So I'll do that 12 issues, and then it's sort of like volume 1 is done. But I do have notes for a possible volume 2 and 3. 3 would definitely be the end. I have kind of a conclusion in mind there.
Okay.
Where hopefully each volume would stand alone, but they would also connect together to make like a bigger.
Yeah. So you'd have like a 3-part kind of trilogy there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I think, knowing me, I have a hard time not finishing stuff when I start it, so I think there's a pretty good chance I'll do volume 2 and 3, but how fast I dive into it as soon as I'm done this might depend on other things.
How successful this is.
It's success, and how and whether or not something else comes up that distracts me and things like that. You never know. So
life does that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I want to talk kind of maybe about your inspirations and influences from the art side. So you mentioned that it came from the original drawing of Ayla, who's the blue-haired character on the front there, and I'll grab a picture from you and post that. And which is interesting for me, because as a writer, I tend to come from like a story perspective or a world perspective first, and so like looking from doing it from a character perspective, like especially a visual perspective, is kind of interesting, and then building a story and a world out of that, which is super cool. And I particularly, what drew me to the comic in the first place was kind of the aesthetic that you brought to it. So it's got like a punk feel, and it's kind of got like the like Tank Girl, but with the Marvel kind of like a lot of the Marvel action poses and that kind of feel to it. So that's really neat.
I think that probably comes from just growing up. I probably read a lot more Marvel and that kind of stuff, and so that definitely had an influence on my drawing. But then as I've gotten, and I still like Marvel stuff and DC stuff and everything, but in more recent years, I've definitely gravitated a lot more to more indie stuff and a little more. So I think that thematically it starts to lean a little bit more on that, and then but that drawing influence will always be there. Yeah, I think too some of the punky stuff too is that like there was sort of those first few drawings when it was sort of no plot involved, there was almost like some degree of parody being put into it, kind of like a parody on like 90s comics and stuff, like especially with Honora. She's the second one that I did. She's the one with the green hair, and she's got like pouches all around her belt, and so far I've only, even though I've only released 3, I've drawn like 8 of the comics now, and not once has she ever opened one of those pouches. But that was just like a design thing from the 90s, like starting with Deadpool and then Cable and everything, where like everybody had to have pouches. So I kind of like, I had started with Ayla by putting these useless trinkets. Like I mentioned, the Hula Girl, she also has a air freshener hanging off of her gun and stuff like that. And then I just kind of kept pushing it farther into kind of 90s comic parody. Yeah. And even though the plot doesn't resemble that, I still kept those traits and stuff. But
yeah, I kind of picked up on a lot of that. That was really interesting. So I want to kind of bring up the cover art that you did, because I really like it. You're doing a comic that involves 5 female characters that are and I think that are pretty sexy, and I think what you've done a good job of, especially on the cover on the first issue, is kind of like eliminating that, or like I said desexualizing in a post earlier, but that's not really what I wanted to say. It's like taking the focus off of that and focusing it on other characteristics of the characters.
Yeah.
So like blacking out the bodies, focusing on the hair, the eyes, the smile, the wings, and just kind of their movement. Yeah. More than like body aspects. And I noticed when you read through this episode and some of the other episodes, I don't know if it was a conscious decision, but there's definitely like an approach to.
I think it was a little bit of both, because I definitely was, because like when the original drawing happened, that was maybe a little bit more blatant, because it was sort of almost like a tattoo art type comic, 90s comic half-breed kind of thing. And then when I started thinking of story elements and I started taking it a bit more seriously, I did think about drastically changing costume designs and stuff for that exact reason. But at the same time, they're fairies and they're 9 inches tall and stuff like that, and it kind of felt like it didn't really seem like it was that necessary. And also my intent from a plot perspective was to never do anything particularly like sexual with the characters or anything like that, and I kind of thought like maybe they just own it and you're not drawing attention to it, and just kind of the way that it is. And they're also like, they're supposed to be essentially made out of concentrated fairy dust, and they can they're very durable. So like armor and stuff seem kind of unnecessary and whatnot. And it kind of gave me a chance to kind of individualize them a little bit at the same time, because they can kind of just be dressed their own way with their own gear and things like that. The second one also shows them watching Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger in a scene, and so that was sort of to like some of the bullets going across the chest and stuff like that was sort of kind of implying that they maybe were influenced by 80s action movies and stuff like that.
So they've got all this like they've kind of been interacting as characters. They've kind of been interacting with human culture a little bit, and I've read the first 2 and I've purchased the 3rd one, and I just have been busy and haven't quite got to it yet. But it's going in kind of in the direction of like there seems to be like this the other world war, but even the fairies are against helping the humans and intervening. But it seems like even then, like this squad is unsure that that's the right path, and they're kind of more interested in humans than maybe the rest of the other worlders are.
That was kind of the idea, was that well, a lot like anything in the world, sometimes you belong to a faction of some kind that goes in a certain direction, and you're part of that just by proxy, but you don't necessarily agree with what they're doing. And so that was sort of it's kind of, I think, a running theme that not everybody is on 100% agreement of the side that they're maybe attached to or whatever. And so they
topical topic.
So so they have had a lot of influence from a world that they're now being told they shouldn't be a part of, and they want to be loyal, but then at the same time they want to be themselves and things like that.
And because they live so long, they've kind of had these like
so they've seen the ups and downs of everybody's society and stuff,
and they've kind of had this pick and choose of
pop culture references and stuff.
And that gives you lots of flexibility as an artist and stuff, right?
For sure.
And I like how you've kind of played in the mythical world, like you're bringing in mythology kind of from all over a little bit, and finding ways to tie that in.
And that was a fun part of fun but time consuming part of it, because like I had major plot tent poles in mind, but I didn't have the whole thing structured yet. So one of the first things I did was kind of make a world Bible, where I just did a bunch of research on, I mean, there's a lot more that I could pull from, and I might still for future stories and stuff, but just reading stuff online and watching like top 10 creatures from this mythology and that mythology and stuff like that on YouTube. And then I would just make a note of all of them, and then I would do deeper dives into them, and then kind of design my own version of them and stuff like that. And the idea being that what we talk about as myths now derived from something at some point before it was like a secret, and by the time it's gotten to us now, it's evolved to the point where it's maybe doesn't look exactly like it really did back then or in reality. And so that's why I can kind of do my own spin on it a little bit more freely. Although sometimes I lean very heavily on the classic looks as well. But
so it's kind of like Neil Gaiman and that magical realism, like Neverwhere kind of thing. This other world has just been going on and evolving in its own way from these, and it's kind of split off a long time ago from the human world.
Yeah, definitely. I actually only just recently started reading Sandman. I'm only 3 volumes into it, and there was a couple moments in it where I was sort of like, it's like, oh, I have something like that. I didn't even know I didn't know you already did that. Not shocking, because that kind of just happens. Everyone pulls from the same. Well, I might be influenced by somebody that was influenced by Neil Gaiman at some point. And
there are no new stories. There are just different takes on old stories and different combinations and all that kind of stuff, building it up. I went through that like anxiety doing partly the writing program, but just like trying to start going through that middle stage of going from like an amateur writer to a professional writer. Where you're like, oh, everything's been written already. Do I have an original voice? Do I have anything unique to say and a unique way to put it? And like, you're always going to be building on other things. So, you know, it's that, as long as you're respectful and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. It's like, a lot of times somebody will mention a story idea or whatever, or in the comics class and they're pitching stories, and it'll make somebody think of another thing that they've seen. And so you always want to point that thing out, but it's never or very rarely anyway to tell that person not to do that because it's been done. It's just more like, check this out to make sure that you don't follow the exact same beats. But you can totally do that story. Just find your own way to do it. And,
exactly. And the way we take like Hollywood especially is just going to take a Robin Hood movie again and again and again. And I'm writing one myself right now, but it's totally silly. But,
like Men in Tights silly?
No, it's more like I thought about going more satirical with it, but it's called Cannibal Robin Hood, and it's
well, that sounds pretty awesome.
It's kind of like Mad Max post-punk as opposed to like being silly. But the take is pretty like absurd.
Okay, well, no, that sounds really cool. Like future or just alternate world?
In near future.
Okay,
yeah. It would be like Children of Men meets Prince of Thieves meets Mad Max kind of.
Awesome. I also like that you went Prince of Thieves.
Yeah.
Because I know that Costner can't do an English accent to save his life, but it's still a really fun movie.
Oh yeah, and like the production design and stuff is like ridiculously good. And the rest of the acting around him is ridiculously good. Yeah. Forever going to love Alan Rickman in that as the sheriff.
And both me and my mom to this day, if it's been really cloudy for a long time, will quote Morgan Freeman and just yell like, "Is there no sun in this cursed country?"
And there isn't.
Oh
man, I watched that in 8th grade English class. This is how they educate us in Canada. They show us Hollywood movies and Fernandez's history.
We did that too. We never did Prince of Thieves though. I watched that when I was like really little, and then I was just obsessed with it for a year or two, I think.
There's the Kevin Costner thing. Anyways, I actually like Waterworld. Like that's one of my.
No, Waterworld's not nearly as bad as people make it out to be.
No,
it's got some issues and it's got some major cheesiness, but I think it was sort of when it was like it went so over budget and so over schedule, and that all that information got out at a time when we didn't know everything going on behind the scenes. So you're just like, oh, this movie's a disaster, and I think people went into it thinking this either needs to be the best thing ever, or they already decided it was going to suck. Yeah,
and Kevin Costner was kind of a jerk about it the whole time or something. Like there was all that drama that was going on, which kind of doesn't help your movie.
Yeah, and he kind of disappeared for a while, not that long after that.
Yeah.
When he came back, he seemed a lot more humble, but for a while there, I think he was riding a little too high off of Wolves.
Wolves, and then Robin Hood, and then... and then he was doing Nicholas Sparks books for movies. Okay, and so this is gonna be a little bit of the other stuff that I like to talk about, just to more personalize and get to know you. So, and I guess we'll end up talking more about process and stories and stuff, because that's some of these questions.
Yeah.
My question that I like to ask everybody is, what's your drug? And for people watching, that doesn't necessarily mean going out and getting messed up, but it can be anything from like coffee to your ultra marathoning to like meditation to, you know.
Well, I'm not a literal drug guy.
Mm-hmm.
The one that is probably the most true, although lately I haven't necessarily been doing it as much, is just one of the reasons I am who I am and why I like doing this stuff is just my love of movies and stuff. So sometimes doing a double or triple feature, kind of take the night off and just do that will kind of clear my head a little bit.
Yeah. So like go to the movies and just like watch, or just line them up at home.
Or well, both. I meant line them up at home, but definitely like going out and stuff too, especially with friends and stuff. I think if I lived near a movie theater, I probably would go to theaters on my own every once in a while. Mm-hmm. But it's a bit more of an event, so usually because it's not like next door, so I always plan it.
Yeah, I had one just down the street and they closed it and moved it to Park Royal, so it's no longer there. Yeah, it's like a 3-block walk to the movie theater, and man, that was my movie theater growing up, and now it's gone. I saw all those Disney films that they're remaking there.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Going back that far. Wow.
Oh, yeah. Early North End.
Yeah, no, I like to kind of almost... Well, I mean, sometimes I'll do like a franchise marathon, like all 3 Back to the Future or something like that. But I like doing... even if it's just like Netflix movies, sometimes even something I haven't seen, I'll always like to try to kind of curate it. We'll try to find like 3 that have some sort of common theme or actor or filmmaker or something like that, and I'll kind of like binge that in a night.
Okay, just kind of like go deep into some.
Yeah, and then that you kind of zone out and just kind of appreciate that, and then it kind of recharges you a bit. But I haven't been doing that as much lately, just because finding the time to be as consistent as I'd like to be working on it. Sometimes even if I'm in that mood, I won't necessarily do it because I feel like I won't enjoy it if I feel like I'm wasting an evening's worth of work time, you know. And then the 2 things kind of cancel each other out a little bit. Yeah,
I had that just going through a big production and finishing that and being like, oh, I have free time to like sit down and catch up on all these things that but when you're in production and you have like a project goal, it's sometimes really hard.
Yeah, because it feels like it's never going to get done if you're not working on it. And
constantly.
No, I am determined though, when I'm finished chapter 12 of this and then I'm done for that first run of it, I'll probably take at least a couple of weeks to just watch stuff and read stuff and like get caught up on as much of the things I feel like I've missed out on in the past. But yeah, I still try to see the big movies in the theaters when they come out because I want to see them on the big screen while I can or whatever. But the ones that I miss in theaters, sometimes they pile up before I actually will sit down and watch them.
Yeah, I found that happens with me too. Yeah, I've seen 2 movies in theaters this month, and it was Us and Endgame, and that's it. And like,
I wanted to see Us, and I missed that.
It was good. Yeah. I really like Jordan Peele's approach because he comes from comedy and horror, and it's like he does a really cool interview with Pete Holmes on You Made It Weird, where he talks about this was before Get Out came out, and so he was talking about his approach to storytelling and how comedy and horror both build to the same emotional point, and then you choose which way to break it. Either you scare people or you release the tension by making them laugh. And his...
That's interesting. I never thought about that angle, but it makes total sense.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and I've learned a lot listening to that interview. Just some of those storytellers talk about what they do, but in Us, he does really his jump scares, like the way that he sets up the timing for them. He'll like, because we're kind of programmed to be watching a movie and be like, it's about, we're usually not thinking about it unless you've edited a movie or you've watched so many and done the storytelling, but it's like, it's about like 2 or 3 seconds of that build and then break, right? But he plays with it throughout that film, where he'll start that process and then he'll cut it out early, or he'll draw it on longer, and it just is super smart.
So you don't know where to expect that.
That I thought was really interesting.
I remember when Get Out was first announced, everybody assumed, because you hear the premise and you hear who's making it, and it could kind of go either direction. And I remember everybody assuming it was a comedy until that first trailer came out. And everyone was like, "What is this?" And then it was awesome. That was one that took me a while to catch too, but when I finally did, I really liked it.
Yeah, I caught that one in theaters. That was actually a really interesting experience. Here in Vancouver, you tend to get a pretty like broad racial audience, and because that's so charged with all of those issues, it was interesting to look around partly watch the audience in a theater, be like, watch what the white folks are doing and watch what the Asian folks are doing, and just like how they're reacting to each scene.
Yeah.
And I found that really fascinating.
Yeah. Those were that movie because it's exactly what a movie's about, basically.
Yeah, and it plays on all these little stereotypes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, like, that was part of my background in school, was looking at race and racialization in media and stuff, and so that was a really fun movie for me.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. And I guess we talked a little bit about this, but what's your approach to storytelling in general?
Well, it'll kind of depend. Like, we were talking earlier about how this one started with the drawing of one of the characters, and like being an artist that'll sometimes just be like doodling and stuff like that. That's definitely not the first time something's come up that way. But it'll kind of depend. A lot of times it'll start with a plot idea instead. Sometimes random, like I have notes for random scenes that don't belong to any story yet. That I'm just sort of like, one day I'll think of something where this will fit in, or like this would be a really cool opening for like an action movie, but I have no idea what the hell that action movie would be about. I just know there'd be attention grabbing kind of thing. Yeah. And then eventually you drop them in. I think what I did for the most part though was, once I have enough of an idea that I think it might actually lead somewhere, I'll usually start either a notebook or like a Word document or something for it that I'll just add stuff to as I think of it. And ideally that'll gestate for a while before I actually start taking it seriously. So by the time I actually want to start putting a plot together, I have enough of the elements, and it's sort of more just figuring out how they're going to fit together, and I'll go from that.
Yeah, I think something that, if you've never tried to put stories together like this, and there's definitely a process that they teach us in school for like writing and building a story, but that's all like the technical stuff that comes after you've kind of developed an idea.
Yeah.
And I find like that process of collecting those ideas, like you said, and putting them in a document, or like they sit there and then you go about your day. Yeah. And your brain just kind of like works on it in the background. Yeah. And there's like, I think a lot of people miss that part of the process when they're thinking about it. There's this whole bunch of like, I need to just let the ideas work through myself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There was somebody on a podcast one time that really frustrated me. I think they're talking about when J.J. Abrams and them were working on Force Awakens, and they delayed it by like 6 months or something like that. And he said it was because he wanted more time to work on the script. And the guy, he just kind of like freaked out about, it's like, oh, just write a script, it's not that hard. And it drove me nuts on a lot of different levels. But what he used as his example was that Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard, when they wrote Cabin in the Woods, they did it in a weekend. Okay. But the major detail that he left out, because I remember them telling that story as well, and the behind the scenes stuff for that, was that they had first come up with the idea working on Buffy the Vampire Slayer together, and had been talking about it off and on in conversation for like years. So when they rented their hotel rooms that weekend and were like, we're actually going to write this, they had like basically the whole thing kind of figured out. And it was because they had gestated for that long that they kind of knew all the details. It was just figuring out some of the minor details, figuring out the order and figuring out the dialogue and stuff. And that movie would never have been written that fast if it wasn't for years of pre-planning and everything, and not everybody has that opportunity to do that.
Exactly. And I found that, and even looking at what are a couple movies that have come out really Hell or High Water, and what was his other movie that, like, apparently he wrote that one. He like I can't remember his name.
Was it, I'm forgetting his name as well, was it the guy, did you Place Beyond the Pines, was that him, or was that
No, he did Wind River.
Okay, I don't know if I saw Wind River.
No, I didn't either. Yeah. But I that was the second one. But he was an actor, and he was on Sons of Anarchy, and was like, I hit my acting peak, and then he was like, I'm just gonna move to writing because that seems like the thing to do. And he wrote it was called Comancheria, and it was made as Hell or High Water, which is a pretty good Western. And apparently that was written in 21 days. And when I was Rick Drew was like griping about that, but it's, that's really it's a good script. But there's lots of good scripts. It's like, it's a good script, and 5 directors in Hollywood, and 10 producers in Hollywood, and you can hand it to them and be like, hey, I've been a professional on these shows, and I know how these things work, right?
An access point to that right away. And then also too, not to kind of defame him or anything like that, because I haven't read the actual script of it too, but what he wrote in 21 days might have ended up changing quite a bit before it ended up on screen as well, right?
Yeah, which is frequently what happens.
Yeah.
And even like the scripts that I write for YouTube, by the time I get to production, like they change. And once you're in the middle of production, the last one I did, there was stuff we had to end a day early because of issues, and I kind of had to rewrite the third act and like plan out a whole new set design and stuff like that, just because that's how things ended up.
Yeah, you never know what's gonna actually come up in front of you. And even when you don't have like actual physical stuff to worry about, even with like animation and stuff, sometimes you just realize how that shot looks really cool, but it's also significantly more difficult to draw, or maybe it's going to require you to make certain assets that you don't already make, and you're going to have to make them for this 1 3-second shot, and you just completely restructure it so that you're not wasting that, especially if you're doing a tight budget or no budget.
Time. Yeah, exactly. So how much time do you split? Do you have any other animation projects coming up, or?
Right now, not so much. I have other things that I want to do at some point. It's nothing that I'm actually actively, other than writing some notes and stuff here and there for some script ideas. I do have another movie. I have a few other movies I would like to do. The one that's probably there is one that's higher on the list, but I don't think I'll go that route unless I can either find some sort of backing or at least crowdfund so I can get more people
on board with that already. Yeah, it's a lot of work to make a.
And it wasn't the last one that I did was I had made. I've done 2.
Okay, cool.
And the first one I did kind of on a whim. Like I wrote a script based on a short story I had written in high school. Just 'cause I had this idea one day on how I could rework that into like a feature, and then it was very dialogue heavy. So I thought using like flash animation, which is a little bit quicker, and being dialogue, I could probably do it relatively quick. And then so I started thinking about maybe doing it, and I just was playing with designs, and eventually I just ended up going all the way with it.
Cool.
And but it was off and on. It spread over a fair bit of time, but all things considered, wasn't that long considering how long it was. But then I thought, if I looked at what I did, and it had lots of issues with the end product personally, but I kind of thought that if I took this a bit more seriously and I took a bit more time at this stage and everything, maybe I could actually do something a little bit more presentable, and with what I had learned making it, I could probably also even do it faster. But it turns out I was very wrong on how fast that it would do, because it was more technically ambitious. So the climax of Snot ended up taking the same length of time as the entirety of the other movie did, because there was so many like crowds and explosions and different effects and stuff like that. And then I had other technical issues that would slow me down and stuff too. I had a weird rendering thing that had me stop working for like a month before I figured out what was happening and stuff like that. And then having to put it aside to focus on other things here or there or whatever, for whatever reason. So by the time I was done, it was sort of like, it was also kind of frustrating too, because I think that I made pretty close to the movie that I had originally set out to make when I started it, but by the time it was done, because it took so much longer than I planned, it wasn't necessarily the movie I would have set out to make had I set out to make it now. Yeah.
And that's the way I found with projects too. It's like you get to the end and you're like, I set out what I set out to accomplish, and then you look back and you're like, but if I just done... And you just got to stop and be like, I'm going to do the next thing now, because if I think about that too much, I will go crazy. And I guess so. Oh yeah, we got lots of time left. So what's your general approach to life? You teach students at VFS in the Foundations program. You draw a comic book. What gets you going? What's your keeps you happy, keeps you sane?
I think having the chance to do this kind of stuff is a big part of that. Because being a teacher, it's I do enough hours that I can pay my bills, but I have a little bit more wiggle room in between those hours that I can work on stuff of my own, as well as I do like freelance work here and there as well, of course. But
you do commissions and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And we'll get to the end and do social media stuff.
So that's a big part of it. And then also too, when you're actually there, like sometimes I think you learn, because you kind of develop bad habits as you do stuff. You kind of find your own shortcuts and everything like that. And usually doing it, I mean, everyone has their own way of doing things, and none of them are necessarily wrong. But like, you'll also kind of fall out of the habit of taking certain steps that are actually really helpful, and you kind of don't really realize you've done that until you actually go into a room and tell a bunch of people you should be doing it this way. And then you realize that I haven't been doing it that way, and it'd probably be a lot better if I did. And you kind of, so I think it helps discipline you a bit. And then I think too, just having those conversations with people all the time about their own creative ambitions and their favorite movies and stuff like that, gets me creatively charged, and that kind of encourages me to go home and like work on other stuff and everything like that.
Yeah, I found that too with VFS and just like any school program I've been in general. Like if the people are there excited about what they're learning about and really passionate about it, it's hard not to go home and like be like, I'm gonna not play games tonight. I'm just gonna work on this thing because I'm really excited to share it with people.
Yeah, exactly. It does a lot.
Yeah, and it's a lot scarier when you're in the real world and you're like, I am really excited to share this with people, and then ask them for money.
It's just a very scary element of the whole thing.
I guess that's the life we choose. So what part of town do you live in?
East Van.
East End? Like the drive area?
Not that far. I'm fairly close to the PNE, kind of that.
Oh, okay,
area,
like Hastings Sunrise.
Yeah, so I'm a few blocks from the drive, although you'd have to go up the drive a bit to really get to the drive. But
Okay, cool. Yeah, I lived in that part of town for a while. I'd like to move back.
Yeah. And it's a nice area. I wouldn't mind moving sometime soon-ish, just because my place isn't that huge and everything like that, but I still ideally would stay in the same area if I can make that work. But I haven't started. I got too much on my mind right now to think about moving. Yeah. But I definitely know that it's probably in my not too distant future. To start doing that.
Yeah, when they knock my place down, I'll.
Yeah, no choice at that point. Yeah.
No, but they have to pay me to leave, so that's exciting.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. That'll happen in the next 6 months or so. Okay. So who knows where I will end up, but probably on the other side of the water again. Okay. I like North Van for the nature, but it's pretty like culturally stuffy.
Oh yeah, I could. I mean, I haven't spent much time here, but I feel like just want to hear other people react to North Van. I kind of feel like maybe that's accurate, but I don't necessarily have my own opinion. I just feel like I've picked up on that from other people.
Yeah, I mean, the reputation is partly earned. Like everything closes here at 10. There's a Subway and a 7-Eleven that are open 24 hours, but for the most part, like it's families and retirees and like upper middle class, and everybody else is kind of getting priced out now. Like even like working class is starting to get priced out now in Lower Lonsdale, where it used to be kind of like niches like this are gonna disappear more and more.
I do think it's funny that you're saying how early everything closes, except that Subway is 24 hours. Because I think I live next to what might be one of the only Subways that closes at like 10. And then sometimes I'll have these late classes and I won't get home till right before then, and everything's turned off. Like, I actually think it closes before 10. I think it's 9:30.
That's really fun.
And but yeah, so I'll be like, I need to eat, but it's too late. I don't really feel like making anything. So now is when I want that, and I can't have that.
Yeah. This one I think just moved to 24 hours.
Okay.
This whole like Lower Lonsdale area has really like exploded in the last couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah. A ton of new construction and renovations. And,
actually, I mentioned a friend's event that I was at last weekend. It was actually in North Van. It was at the Shipyard Night Market.
Oh yeah. Right. Yeah.
I'll give him a plug. BWD Photo.
Cool.
He had a table there selling photo prints, and he was doing like $10 portraits and stuff.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there was I really like that space. Like I kind of rag on North Vancouver a little bit, but they've done some like the infrastructure stuff they've done here, and especially along the waterfront at Lonsdale Quay is really nice. They have the
cool setup.
Yeah, the photo galleries there, which I got to go to the opening of, which was an interesting experience, not because the photo gallery was bad, but because of the experience. And the pipe shop night market, and that's where they had that other comic thing that I stopped by.
The mini-comi.
Mini-comi, the UBC comic book anime club did the mini-comi thing, and they do it there, which was the same day as Geektopia, unfortunately. But
yeah, that was weird timing. I think somebody else told me there was something else happening at the same time as well, like not comic specifically, but another arts themed festival or something.
Well, it's summer in Vancouver, so there's something happening every weekend everywhere. But that happens. And I guess some other stuff to talk about. We'll move on to more of what the social media stuff, since we're kind of getting towards the end of my programming like this. So you do a weekly Twitch stream. And that's Outhouse Cartoons on Twitch.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. And you normally do like pop culture stuff that's
usually I started out doing, the intent was kind of more work on whatever I was working on in the moment. So the first handful I did, I quite a bit of combat fairy stuff.
Yeah.
But the deeper I get into that, the more spoilery some of the stuff on screen would be. And then also, I think that since combat fairies has been around long enough to earn a fan base, if it ever will, hopefully it will. But at the moment, it hasn't been around long enough to really judge. And I think people are just, when they see that flash up on their screen that like I'm drawing Spider-Man, it gets a bit more attention maybe than something they haven't heard of. So and also too, I like drawing fan art stuff just because I've been into that my whole life, but I never take the time to do it. So it's kind of, I've been enjoying that excuse to do that once a week.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, that's basically overtaken the stream for now.
Yeah. Cool. So this week was Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Next week I might do, somebody suggested the Lion King because the new one coming out, so I might do something with that. I've always liked the Lion King. I was never like, I did Aladdin a while ago, but Aladdin was like my Disney movie when I was a kid, so that was fun to just do a straight up Aladdin fan art thing. But I think if I do Lion King, so I was never obsessive over it, so I think it might be fun. But I want to try to figure out if I can do some sort of I might just do Timon and Pumbaa because I always like them. But if I'm gonna do something like with Simba, I think I might try to find some kind of twist on it. I haven't decided yet though. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll end up just drawing Simba. I don't know.
Yeah. Do something related to that. Okay, cool. You do Instagram as well. That's Outhouse Cartoons.
Yeah. Also, I was trying to do too.
Are you on Twitter?
Yeah. It's Outhouse Cartoon with no S because it wouldn't let me put that extra character when I first signed up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it would let me if I went and changed it now. I've never tried.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
But I'm sure if you search Outhouse Cartoons with the S, it probably will still come up.
So kick it out, and I'll put all the graphics with the things and put the links in the nethers as we do with the YouTube. And I think that's pretty much where all the stuff I wanted to ask and talk about. I ended up getting 2 copies of Combat Fairies from you, and I'm going to give this one away on the internet.
Oh, nice.
I know.
Fancy.
You signed it. Fancy. I know. You've signed it already. It's probably going to be one of those like, comment, share things because I want attention. And you want attention. And this is actually really good. And I like kind of where it's going. And so I'm excited to do that. And look, my Twitter and Instagram for this contest, which is at Foxfire. And I will put that right there as well. Cool. So, Dylan Moore, Outhouse Cartoons, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Fox.
Yeah, and this is West Coast Hustle, and I'll be coming back monthly with different interviews, artists, workers, activists, what they're up to on the West Coast of North America.
Awesome. Cool. I'll be watching. Keep watching and stuff.
Thank you.
Actually, my one prelim question from the questions is when you mention hustle, you mean just creative hustle, or like should I actually be mentioning like what pays the bills, and like should I get into like a teaching thing? Or?
Yeah, so that's the first part, and then like because a lot of it, I want to get into like people are surviving in Vancouver and on the West Coast, fucking expensive, and trying to like do a thing, and even like talking about like I know a lot of us are trying to kind of break into an industry that that wants our technical skill but doesn't necessarily want the stories we're telling. Right, totally. Just kind of. Okay, so I'll do a quick intro here, and then we'll jump right in with an introduction, and talk about. We'll start with what's your hustle, and then we'll go on to the projects and stuff. Okay.
I distracted myself for a minute because I realized that, or maybe at the time I did it on purpose, but Brianna's got that rocket she wears on her back. Oh yeah, and it's actually not there. Oh yeah. I might have done it on purpose because so it wouldn't mess with her silhouette. Yeah. But I don't remember, so I saw that when we were talking. I was like. I almost stopped what we were saying to comment on it. But I was like, nah, I don't need to draw attention to that.
I can cut this part. We'll have this as the interlude. Pause, cancel, and start. Okay, cool.
I didn't know we were already recording again when I went off on that.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. Just
well, if you do keep it in, I don't really care. But
okay. Yeah. Maybe I'll put it at like the end or something.
Blooper.
Yeah. The blooper reel at the end.